Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery podcast on conversational witchcraft. As you know, we are here with some of my favorite people, some people that have inspired me. And today, super excited because we have the amazing Ivo Dominguez Jr. To be honest, he's the only person I've had on this show that I don't actually have a personal relationship with. But I have heard so many amazing things that he and I are going to get along famously. So I'm really excited to learn about his journey. Let me tell you guys a little bit about him. He's been an active Wicca and Pagan. He's been active in the Wicca and Pagan community since 1978. He currently serves as one of the elders of the Assembly of the Sacred Wheel, a Wiccan tradition. Ivo has been published in numerous periodicals, is the author of several books, and in his mundane life has been a computer programmer, an executive director of an AIDS HIV service organization, a bookstore owner, and many other things. Some of his works include Keys to Perception, Practical Astrology for Witches and Pagans, Casting Sacred Space, and Spirit to Speak. I am just so excited to get to know you and find out what brought you here and how you got where you are in your journey. Ivo, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're recording this bright and early on a Wednesday morning, so we're pretty much doing coffee talk, which is kind of my favorite.
Coffee is good.
Coffee is. I was thinking before we logged in, I was like, oh, Ivo's going to hang out with me while I have my love affair with my morning cup of coffee.
Right.
A great hail goddess Caffeina.
And everybody's happier if I've had my coffee as well.
I'm kind of a coffee snob. Justin and I had gone to Portland, Oregon, and we did a coffee tour, and we learned all about, fancy coffee and third wave coffee, and like Dunkin' Donuts won't do it for me now. Like I can't. No.
Well, I say that we serve a lot of coffee in our household. Now, there's the supply that's for me.
Right.
My other half is not a coffee drinker.
No.
But we also have, when it's not COVID land, every weekend, a ton of people through our house. There's several covens based on the land we live on, and we do workshops and rituals and social gatherings and whatnot. And as you might imagine, that's a lot of coffee.
That's a lot of coffee. Yeah.
And the good stuff's expensive.
Yeah, and so it should be.
It should be, right?
Yeah.
But I serve a lot of coffee, and people go, "Oh, your coffee is so delicious. What is it?" And then I horrify them because I pull out the giant can of Folgers or whatever it is that I bought for cheap.
No.
But they always say, "Why is it good?" Before every big event, when I start the several urns, I take the can and I pop the lid and I hold my hand over it, and I imagine coffee beans growing on the mountainside, and I imagine Ethiopia or Hawaii or whichever place and I infuse my memory of the most delicious coffee I've ever had into that can, and then I make the coffee and it tastes better for them.
That is some serious kitchen witchery right there.
It actually works.
I believe it. I mean, to be fair, I have never. I mean, I'm a kitchen witch, and that's what I do. I do the visualization and I do the meditation, and I do that kind of work over my food. I've never done it over coffee, but that if you can make Folgers taste like Kona, you are one hell of a powerful witch, my friend.
It won't taste like Kona, but everybody is shocked that they're being served the cheap coffee because, wow. I mean, actually, we noticed that during COVID, like, wow, we are spending $300 less a month because we're not having people over.
Oh, wow. I mean,
I'm serious. I mean, we have a constant flow of people in our place.
I believe it. How wonderful is it that you have this space and this land that you are able to share with community in that way? I mean, I feel like that's the dream for so many people. And yeah, I mean, since COVID, right? I mean, I travel a lot for work, and I don't have people as often. I mean, we have a pretty big space in our yard, and I do a very large Samhain dinner and ritual every year. Obviously, not in a year of COVID, but those big celebrations are You know, for me, and you had mentioned it in your notes that this is such an important part of your practice,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
gathering people, and not just gathering people, but gathering people around big meals and food. So what do you find is different in terms of your spiritual practice when it comes to cooking for a big group versus cooking just for yourself and your partner?
You know, I only cook for others, truthfully.
Wow.
If it's if Jim is away on doing a consulting gig or something, I barely eat, or I eat leftovers until they run out, and then I eat peanut butter and jelly. And
Wow.
but if he's around, or if we have events happening, I start thinking about, well, what am I going to do, and how am I going to prepare this, and what things can I pull out of the garden, because we have a big garden.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always about other folks, because as much as I love food, it's when I'm doing it for someone else that I start thinking about, okay, and I keep like this running list of my head of food preferences for the people I know, and allergies for the people I
Yeah.
know, and also what's and people joke. We have sweat lodges and a bunch of other things, and sometimes the focus I'm going, it's got to be tasty and wonderful, but it has to be recuperative. It has to be healing food.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or if it's food for a big feast around, a couple of the covens have a thing that some for turns to a feast and divination.
Can you repeat
So
that? You cut out just a little bit.
yeah, so for the autumn equinox, a couple of the covens that use our space tend to revolve around doing a feast and doing divination for each other, and that's, sometimes they do a formal ritual, but a lot of times it becomes a feast and divination for the coming year.
Yeah.
And then I start thinking about, okay, what can I sneak into the food that opens up the psychic senses, but still food?
Yeah.
Or how can I make it comfortable so that people can eat and talk, and break off into little groups and pull out their tarot cards, or whatever. So I tend to think about all the ways in which the food can facilitate. And honestly, I would say that um, it's I get in trouble with some people because I also am a vegetarian and mostly vegan most of the time, but I will cook meat for other people,
Right.
which puts me in a bad place, because some people that are very hardcore are angry at me for cooking the meat for them,
Hmm.
and then other times I get the reverse thing, which, like, they're eating something and go, "There's no meat in the chili," and I said, "No, there's no meat in the chili."
Wow. So do you find that in terms of because obviously when you're cooking these giant meals for people, um, and that is in itself for me a sacred act, right? I I I identify as a kitchen witch. So my spiritual identity, I would say, is pagan. If I'm meeting somebody, I'm like, oh yes, I'm pagan, and then trying to,
Yeah.
which exact little thing, to break it down. And the easiest way to explain it is I'm a kitchen witch. So most of, not all of, most of my practice is food, cooking, visualization in the kitchen, staying connected to Mother Earth with food, everything you're talking about. But for me, the pinnacle of my practice is cooking for other people, is creating these containers for people to celebrate or express, or to join and to gather around food.
Hmm.
And for you saying that you don't do that for yourself, um, does that mean that you're like only practicing because you obviously are obviously, I mean, out of everyone I've talked to so far, like you're someone who's really practicing these theories of kitchen witchery when you are kind of, as for lack of a better term, in the zone of cooking for people, right? I mean, that's,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
isn't that something that we all grew up with, right? Like, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm an Italian girl and I grew up with big meals, celebrations, food, 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 food. So that the ritual of the preparation for large groups, right? And so you seem to be
Yeah.
practicing that all the time when you're cooking for these people and
I
you're
am.
not doing it for yourself. Is that because that's not how you identify, that's not part of your spiritual path? Or is it only part of your path when it's regarding others?
It's complicated because depending upon who you talk to, you're going to run into somebody and say, "Well, yeah, Evo does these really complicated, almost ceremonial magic things, or Evo does, astrological magic, or Evo does
Yeah.
blah blah blah." And I do, and I'm not saying that it isn't part of what I do all the time, but I don't necessarily keep the same divisions. Like, for example, I was giving a class recently about every day. And one of the things I mentioned is I have an herb garden in my head.
In your
You know
head.
how people have
Yeah.
memory, you know how people have memory palaces and rooms to,
Yes.
memory methods to keep
Yes.
track of how things are. And I grow herbs. I use them also medicinally. And what I find is that if I'm somewhere and I don't have herbs with me, usually don't. Somebody like a somebody had a encounter with poison ivy at an event I was at, and I didn't have any of my stuff with me. I had flown in to teach at the event, so I said, "Look, I'm gonna." So I walk into my garden in my head. I pluck some of the herbs I need. I can smell them in my mind,
Mhm.
and I'm holding nothing but a glass of water, and I'm imagining in water and imparting my memory and then just over there. Did it poison ivy go away? No. Was there an improvement? Yes, because you can carry the memory of the food or the herbs with you. And if
Mhm.
you've made a real relationship with those things, then they're always with you. Somebody feeds me something because I travel a lot and teach a lot normally that is dreadful, which happens a lot, especially if they're trying to figure out how to feed a vegetarian and
Yeah, it's
they've
hard.
never it's hard and or they've never understood that spices matter or
Right, right,
right.
exactly. Right. It's like, here's a plain potato. You're a vegetarian. We have no idea what else to give you. Here's a plain potato and a salad. And you're like, thanks. Well, I have a gluten allergy and I'm like allergic to tons of
Uh,
food. So
yeah,
I'm not like, I eat meat because it's one of the things that I can eat. Um,
right.
right. So, but people don't know how to cook for me either. They're like, first of all, we don't want to cook for you because you're the kitchen witch and we're intimidated by you. And I'm like, please, for
Sure.
the love of God, just make me some gluten-free macaroni and cheese out of a box. I'm happy. Um, but
Right.
but they don't know what to give you, right? When you have limitations, they have no idea.
So I end up eating the food and then on my tongue and in my mind, I transform it with the memory of what better food tastes like.
That's hilarious.
No,
That's
and
hilarious.
so that I bring my spices with me.
That's really, really interesting. And again, that's part of, you're 100% right. You're really sparking so much in me to think of different ways to do what I do,
Mhm,
because I don't have a memory map of a garden, or like I think for me a beautiful visualization for that would be like a well-stocked fridge, where you would open it up in your mind and see, these are all the things that I could have, or could be making. And then I really want to get back to how you said that you imbued the glass of water with
mhm,
the herbs in your mind. And really, that's very transformative magic right there, being able to channel the energy of the food. And again, I don't
mhm.
think people who don't practice anything that has to do with kitchen witchery, I don't think
Yeah.
that they realize you can do this with food, where people can channel spirit, people can channel angels, people can channel fairies, goddesses, deities, but they don't think about it in terms of food or herbs. So really, how did you discover that that was something you wanted to do or could do?
Energy's energy. I mean, part of it was just thinking about things. And it's like, well, how is it any different if it's a pattern of energy? I think it actually started. The first time I thought of trying that was I was having a conversation with Flo, my husband's sister, who's big in the New Age community, and that's like her thing. And she uses homeopathic remedies a lot.
Mm,
And truthfully, they basically have nothing in them.
yep.
I mean, you basically dilute it down to the point where there's nothing left.
Yes.
So I said, well, it seems to work for her and it seems to work for people that she's working with. And I go, well, that means that the only thing that's left in that is the imprint of the energy of whatever that herb or whatever that mineral was.
Mhm.
So if that can work with homeopathic remedies, why can't it work with a glass of water and me zapping it?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really good point. What comes to mind is the flower essences.
Yes,
I mean, you could be making tinctures with flowers, but oftentimes, like you said, they're essences.
right.
You're literally bottling the essence or the energy
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
that flora or that fauna, or
Right.
whatever it is that
Hmm.
you're doing there. And it's again, you put it in these terms and it makes perfect sense. And it's very interesting for me, Evo. Thank you, because this is a part of what I already practice that I never would have thought about before. So I'm really inspired by this. Part of the work that I do is understanding the energetic properties of foods, and I talk a
Hmm.
lot about it in my work, in my teaching, in my books. Even my olive oils that I make, they have, okay, this is this is garlic, and this is for protection because garlic is a protective energy food for warding off
Hmm.
whatever. And that's the work that I do in the first place. I would not have thought to be able to, oh, it's interesting to carry it with me the way you're
Hmm.
suggesting, that you're putting the energy into the food when it's in front of you, or you are like what I like to say is like waking
Hmm.
up the
Hmm.
energy
Hmm.
when you are aware that garlic is for protection. Then you're like, oh right, garlic is for protection. Now I can do the visualization, I can do the meditation, I can work with this ingredient and understand what it's for. I would not have thought to take it with me and be able to imbue it into other things, when I don't actually have a bulb of garlic with me. So I feel like you've blown my mind a little bit here. And I'm excited to now, explore that a little bit. Because, yeah, I mean, most of your work is psychic and astrology and stuff like that. So, does any of that bleed into when you are gathering people for big celebrations?
Well, sure it does. And, I was born in Cuba. We came over when I was a little kid and lived in Florida. We had huge family gatherings.
Can you repeat
And
that? You cut out a little bit when you said where
sure.
you were born.
So I was born in Cuba and came over when I was a little kid.
Mhm.
And we lived in Florida for a good chunk of my childhood. And we had huge family gatherings. We often had, I never knew how many people were going to be around the table Sunday, whether it was breakfast or dinner. And so that was part of the culture as well. Though I will say that I learned how to cook by observing, though I was not allowed to cook.
Why were you not allowed to cook? Were you too little, or was it
Because
because you were a boy?
no, because I was a boy.
Mm,
And you know what? I didn't actually get to cook on my own until I, moved out and had my own place. But
yeah,
I was always paying attention. But they were like, "Oh no, 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 no! You can help clean up or whatever." But so it was just women's space in the kitchen, and kind of
sure.
like, really, guys,
Yeah, but
I
that's
wanted to
so
cook.
traditional, isn't it? Like, I mean, again,
Yeah,
like
it
as
is.
an Italian, all the women were in the kitchen and all the little girls were expected to be in the kitchen. Well, all the little boys and the dads and the
Right.
uncles got to like sit around and play games, and they just
Oh,
waited. They just
no,
waited
no,
until the
no,
women
no, no.
served them.
Yeah, the men in the family. Most of these memories of those gatherings were outside playing dominoes, smoking,
Wow.
and drinking their coffee.
Cuban coffee. I've never had Cuban coffee. Is
It's
it amazing?
It really, really is amazing, and I love it that if you actually are in Miami or in Ybor City or places that have a proper Cuban population, a lot of the restaurants will have warning signs saying, "If you are not used to our coffee, be careful."
Yeah, I'm not sure if I could, because it's right. It's the teeniest little, like it's like a thimble
Oh,
full,
it's
and knock your socks off.
so strong.
So
I think
strong.
the only thing that's stronger. My other half was in the Peace Corps in Ethiopia,
Oh,
and they have kick-ass coffee, as you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
but they also have a coffee ceremony.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, and it's very different. It's not orderly and sedate like the tea ceremony,
Mhm.
but it involves tiny little demi-tasses of ridiculously strong coffee. They salt the coffee, they don't sugar it because it's so strong.
Okay, that's something. That's
All right,
something.
but basically you have 7 rounds of these little demi-tasses of incredibly strong coffee, and when somebody new moves into your neighborhood or the village, and I said, I know exactly what's happening, because by the end of the cup you are jabbering your head off and you've told your entire life story to everybody. So I think it was designed as an icebreaker.
Yeah, yeah, it's like the opposite of getting someone drunk, but the effects are the same, you know. You really just like this is who's maybe inside of you when
Right.
without the coffee. Like I know for myself, the more caffeinated I become, the more myself I feel because I feel like those barriers are gone. And I think that I was interviewing Matt Oren
Mhm.
yesterday, and we, I said flat out, like, I don't really do psychic work. That's not what I study. Um, and so we're having a lot of those conversations. And one of the things that I was thinking about was that, when I'm caffeinated, I feel like I'm able to connect more
Mhm.
on that sort of other plane. But again, that's not my area of expertise. So I leave that to you guys, the professionals, when it comes to psychic work. I can cook a mean lasagna, but I can't do psychic readings. So we leave the professionals. We leave that to the professionals. Um, wow, how cool, a coffee ceremony. And now, did you
Yeah.
get to experience that, or was that just he just explained it to you?
He explained it to me. I mean, I've tasted, he's made coffee the way that he used to make it when he was in the Peace Corps
Yeah.
living out in a little village. So I know what that strong coffee tastes like with a bit of pinch of salt in it. So I have a sense of a nice, I have a pretty big tolerance, but after 7 of those,
I can't even imagine. I said earlier, we went to, Justin and I went to Portland and did a coffee tour. And
Mhm.
it was absolutely amazing. It was like a walking downtown Portland tour of all the coffee shops and all the different coffee shops. And by the end of it, I I couldn't see straight. Like my eyes were like super wide. And we went to this. I don't know if you've
Mhm.
ever been to Portland, Oregon. There's this
I have,
giant,
yes.
the Powell's City of Books, which is like
Oh, yeah,
the best place on earth. Right? It's like
it is.
for those of you that don't know, Powell's City of Books is literally a city block, a full city block, and like 4 stories tall, and it's just a bookstore. And I went in there like ridiculously high on coffee. Like I couldn't close my eyes. Like I couldn't, I kept trying to blink and I couldn't blink. And I was just looking around like this. And my husband, like, we're like, okay, I'm going to go look at this section. You go look at that section. He finds me. I'm like wandering aimlessly around the cookbooks. And he's like, are you okay? I'm like, I can't close my eyes. Like, I can't even imagine what it would be like with all that Cuban coffee or all of that Ethiopian.
Right.
And I love caffeine. But I
Mm.
try to limit myself to
Sure.
one a day. One if
I do a really evil thing around caffeine, and that is evil for the people around me. So every year I do 1 week where I do zero caffeine just to hit the reset button on my tolerance.
that's actually a really good idea.
It's not a bad thing. It's a miserable first couple of days, but honestly, I then have the capacity to enjoy the lift that I get from caffeine again, and I don't necessarily need more and more and more to get the same effect.
Mhm. We I mean, I can't believe we're having this whole conversation. Like I have Ivo Dominguez and I'm talking about coffee, but I mean,
Right.
what I mean is the great and amazing Ivo Dominguez, and we're having a coffee conversation, but whatever. We we constantly get new coffee. So
Mhm.
I have my cousin got me a subscription to a coffee club for Christmas, which is awesome.
Mhm.
I get new
Right.
coffee from all over the world every month, and they all have different caffeine levels. So I
Mhm.
never get used to, I think most people buy the same coffee over and over and over again. And we always have like one standard in the house, but then I have urns of coffee. Like you can't see them, they're just
Right.
out of frame here. So I never really get too used to one level of caffeine. So I always kind of have that, that boost.
Variable.
Cause like 1 week where I'm drinking dark roast and 1 week where I'm,
Mhm.
drinking medium roast. And so that level
Right.
changes. But let's get back to the awesomeness of you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Music.
Because
So,
you're
so I
incredible.
was gonna. Well, I don't know about that, but I was gonna say that one of the things that people forget is that you probably grew up with some kind of blessing over the food or something of that nature, right?
Yeah, of course.
And it's something that a lot of pagans, not, I mean, I know people do differently, but a lot of pagans forget that just because it may be attached to some old memories of your previous religious background
Hmm.
doesn't mean you can't turn the meal into something special by clasping hands around the table, or and having a variety of things instead of like we've had rituals where post ritual there's as much of a ritual at the table because people hold hands to bless the food and
Hmm.
will om at the food, energize the food. We've had people sing to us before we began to eat. So there are ways to create the energetic bond around the table as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the idea
Mm.
of giving thanks for your food is not
It's huge,
exclusively what you would think of as, again, as someone who's a recovering Catholic. It's right.
right?
I like to use that term because you'll always be in recovery from the
Oh
guilt
yeah,
of that.
sure.
So, but it is something that it's not an exclusively Christian idea to give thanks and have gratitude. And I think as
Hmm.
witches and pagans, we tend to be more aware. We are more aware of where our food comes from. And it's not just, and this is something that I think is really important to note when it comes to the blessings and the being grateful of our food, is it's not just about I'm grateful to the earth for this tomato, right? It's
Right.
about who picked that tomato, who washed that tomato, who put the tomato on the shelf for you to purchase, who rung you up for that tomato to exchange the money so you could take that tomato home and put it in your salad. There's
Hmm.
such a chain of other human beings and energy in that, especially the way that we consume food in America. um, Most of the time, and most people are doing 80 to 90% of their shopping at a traditional grocery store. Some of us are lucky enough, like myself, I live in the Northeast and I have farms
Hmm.
all over and I can go to the local farm. And so, okay, look, there's the
Yeah.
cows across the street. So like if I'm going to eat meat, if I'm going to eat red meat specifically, I only buy it from the local farm because I can see the
Hmm.
cows. They're on one side of the street and then I can buy the meat on the other side of the street. So I see how those animals are treated. I know they're very loved. And that's important to me. So all of those steps in between, it's very important that for especially my practice, to take, as you're saying, that time to bless the food and the gratitude of blessing the food.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, is that something that is it something that we do on a regular basis? Is it something we do on a Tuesday night when we're rushing home from work and we're just, like you said, having a peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Right.
Probably not.
Hmm.
Probably not. And I think
Hmm.
that kitchen witchery is something that's so easy to incorporate, right, into every day. Don't you agree?
And perhaps if people viewed it as a different way of being mindful of our connection to things, because a lot of times I encounter folks downplaying the value of kitchen witchery, or having a reaction of something someone identifies as a kitchen witch as a, oh, I guess they're not serious about this, right?
I mean, I don't want to say that I've had that happen, but I would say
But
that's true. I would say that's true, and in my work, so much of what fuels me is trying to kind of close the gap between the pagan
Mhm,
community and the non-pagan community, and being able to
mhm,
use kitchen witchery and food magic to do that and say, okay, yeah, I wrote a book on kitchen witchery, but it's accessible to non-pagans, they'll get it.
right.
And the fact that I make this magically, literally magically infused olive oil and I sell it at Whole Foods. And so Susie Soccer Mom
Mhm.
can buy it. Um, and she's taking in all of that wonderful energy,
Mhm.
but it also
Mhm.
can be used magically. I definitely feel that people can think, oh yeah, maybe there's not as much validity to that, but kitchen witchery is really just like one of the oldest traditions, right? I mean, people have been eating
Mhm.
since people have been on this planet, before religion,
Yes,
right? Um, I
absolutely.
appreciate you saying that. That actually like, makes me feel really fills up my heart a little bit. So thank you for that. Um,
It falls into the general people also throw around terms like low magic and high magic and imply all sorts of bizarre things around them. And I'm going to say we also have to insert middle magic, which is the stuff that we do that's in the physical world and involves our hands and minds and bodies, right?
yeah.
But I don't know if of anybody who doesn't use all three if they're effective.
How do you mean?
Well, a lot of times when people talk about low magic, they're talking about using the correspondences or energies associated with plants or minerals or whatnots to cause particular effects or cause. And they tend to be magics to cause something to happen. A lot of times people think of high magic as working on self improvement or enlightenment or perhaps working with higher order beings. You know, we live in the middle
Mm.
and bring all those things and making the place we live better. So that if you're actually doing your job well as a whatever you identify as, you know, witch, magician, sorcerer, spiritual person, shaman, whatever you call yourself, then you are probably doing all of those things if you're actually making a difference in your life and the life of others.
Yeah. I love that. And you are right. We are human beings living on this planet, right? So we do need just like we need to be living all the time above, below, within,
Yeah.
to, like you said, to have what's the word I'm looking for? Like a well-rounded a spiritual experience. You can't, in my opinion, my humble opinion, be
Mhm.
like, well, you don't do high magic, or I only do high magic. I'm only doing psychic work. I'm only doing this, because then you're not dealing with those parts of you that need to be fully explored, fully realized as a magician or as a person. Like for me, everything comes down to that, like you said, that personal development. It's so important that we are true and real with ourselves so that we
Mhm.
can do true and real spiritual, energetic work. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the one hand, it's valuable to identify, oh, these are my areas of strength or my
Mhm.
areas of expertise. But it almost becomes a crutch or a limiting factor when we become the title or the role or the job description as opposed to being whole. And that
Yes.
means access to all the things we do, including the things that we're not experts at, but we like to do.
Are there any of those things that you don't consider yourself an expert at, but you love?
I actually don't think of myself as an expert at anything. I'm just a really good generalist.
I'm enjoying this conversation so much, and I can't imagine you being a generalist. I think that you have so much knowledge.
Because in any field that I have delved into deeply, I can point at people and say they know more about that.
I think that really speaks to your character,
So,
right?
so for
Like
me,
to
it's
be able to say, I'm not
yeah.
the best at something. I'm always evolving. Always learning. I think that really speaks to your character as a person and as a pagan, to be honest.
I mean, if I'm going to claim something that I feel like I'm pretty good at, and I would say I have a good command of, I am pretty damn good at explaining things to people, figuring out how to make something make sense.
That's why you're such a good teacher. That's why
and
you're such a good teacher.
and part of that is because my dad was a professor.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. By the way, zero connection to my family of origin because I'm queer, which means life ended.
Yeah,
But
I get that.
but dad was a professor. Mom went to college and finished her degree, even though it was unusual, but because it was planned, of course, that she was going to marry and have kids and do the thing, right?
Sure, sure.
But and my aunt went to college. I mean, I had a lot of well-educated, either formally or informally, people in my life, and a lot of people that were readers. My grandmom, my paternal grandmom was a huge reader. All her kids were named after whatever she was reading at the time. I mean, I ended up being named Ivo after my dad because she was reading plays by Ivo Andrić when she was pregnant with my dad. So it was kind of like, I have an uncle Radamanthus. I wish I had gotten that name because she
It's a
was
great
her
name.
Greek mythology phase, one of the judges of the dead. I would have loved that name.
Wow. That's great.
but but I was surrounded by people that were talkers and well read, whether or not formally educated. So I picked up a lot of tips and tricks just listening and paying attention on how to explain things that you know.
Sure, you
And
learned communication skills and how
yeah,
to express that to other people simply by absorbing the type of communication that was happening within the home.
we also had a weird thing in that Cuban Revolution was nasty and messy
Yeah,
and
yeah,
broke a lot of things.
sure,
And for the
sure.
longest time, we thought we were going to go back, and of course, we never did. And finally, my parents decided, "Yep, I guess we're staying here. We've got to become citizens." But they were so hell bent on fitting in
Mm,
because my dad had and mom had thick accents.
yeah,
Which, by the way, when I was a child, they never spoke a word of English in front of me or my sister
yep,
because then it would have imprinted on their accent. So we picked up from television and kids.
yep.
But like when we moved from the enclave of Cubanness in Ybor City in Tampa up to Tallahassee because Dad got a job at FSU, I remember sitting down and Mom and Dad made us watch Hee Haw as no, and a bunch
Like
of
this is
other
American television.
and the Grand Ole Opry and a bunch of things because Tallahassee at the time was basically Crackerville. It was
For
one
lack
of the
of a
most
better
redneck
term, Crackerville. I love it.
one of the redneck places on the planet. So they immediately started prepping us with culture.
I mean, can you call that culture?
We can call it culture, yes.
Yeah, yeah, cracker
Yes, we can
culture,
call it culture.
the culture of crackers. I think that's really interesting
But
to hear. My
yeah,
grandmother, she came over from Italy when she was about 7, and similarly, her parents were like, "You're American. You don't speak English. I mean, you don't speak Italian in the house.
Italian,
You don't
right,
speak Italian anywhere. You speak English." But the grandparents never learned English. So the grandparents
right.
would speak Italian to each other and the kids would speak English. And then the language, unfortunately, it just died within the family. No one speaks Italian in my family on either side, which is kind of sad, I think, because I
Yeah.
think that would for me that would be wonderful, especially because the culture, just like with you, the culture of where your family comes from, um,
Mhm.
for me is so wrapped up in my spiritual practice, right? The food and Italian people, I mean, that's just they're one and the
Yes.
same. You can't think of an Italian person without going, "Ooh, meatballs." So, so I'm a little sad, and like as an adult, I really wish that we had that. But it's interesting to hear you talk about how you learned to how we become, right? How we
Mhm.
become who we are on the paths that we find. I never say that we choose these paths. I feel like we find them and go, "Oh yeah,
Mhm.
this is what I've been looking for forever." So, one of the questions I wanted to ask you is what non-pagan, non-Wiccan influences did you find along your path that brought you down it, or that made you go, "Oh yeah, that's how I feel," or that's what I want to do," or something like that, that maybe it was a movie you saw as a child or a song or something that you went, "Oh yeah, that's kind of brought you back down that to the path that you are find yourself on now."
Well, I mean, quite a few influences, though I will say I was always a huge science fiction and fantasy fan.
Yeah,
And and I think there's a lot of overlap in communities there.
I think so too.
But and it was also one of my escape routes.
Oh, sure.
You know, you could fall into that book, and no matter what was going on into the world, in the world around you, you were in that world instead. But also, I was going to science fiction, fantasy, and Star Trek conventions when I was a young pup.
Oh, I love that so much. I am a
And
giant dork. Giant
oh,
dork.
good, good, good.
Yeah.
And and actually, it was one of my ways of making sure that high school didn't suck.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
So freshman year in high school, I looked around and went, "Oh."
Oh, crap. I hate everyone.
But you see, I've always been a planner and an organization person and whatnot. So I figured out which of the teachers was also a big geek.
Ah, good plan.
And
Good
I
plan.
went out to Mr. Darby and said, "Hey, Mr. Darby, would you like to be the sponsor for a science fiction and fantasy book?" I said, "Sure." Which meant that sophomore year, I had a whole peer group of people that were coming to the science fiction and fantasy book club
So
after
fun.
class, right? So that created an instant support group.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
also meant that, Mr. Dowdy, would you be the chaperone so that we could take a weekend field trip to the science fiction convention happening 2 towns over? Sure.
That's
So
awesome.
so anyway, it was a way of creating a community that was people that felt the same as I did about things, and were a little bit more flexible about a lot of things. And I will say that I am a plotter and planner and try to make my life safe in weird ways. So I also got involved in the school paper, and I also got book more with the school paper than the yearbook. I was actually ended up managing editor of the school paper, which also prevented the number of times that I got shoved into lockers or a head in the toilet, because I came up with this thing that you tell the big ugly athlete that wants to rough you up that if they ever do that again, they're never going to receive proper coverage in the newspaper, and they're never going to have a good picture in the yearbook. I can guarantee that to you.
That's fantastic.
It
But
worked.
yeah, that absolutely worked. And it sounds like what you learned early on was to create your own space. And that is transformative magic, I think.
And that is
Creating
magic.
absolutely, using your will to create a
Hmm.
space where you have like-minded people around you. As you said, creating a safe space for yourself. And
Hmm.
that's magic. I mean, I don't think that there are many young
That is
teenagers
magic.
that, yeah, I don't think there's many young teenagers that would know to do that, to figure that out. So again, I think that goes right back to uh you being who you've always been, this person who brings people together, and
Hmm.
the gathering, bringing bringing knowledge and togetherness.
Yeah, I mean, I still have rediscovered through social media friends that are Facebook friends or Instagram friends that I met during that time period with that club, or with
Wow.
the school paper, or whatever. And though our lives have taken us in very different directions, they recall that was also a space that was warm and welcoming. And I think that magical community, along with meals, are part of it, but magical community means creating places where people can be themselves and look on their garden to share.
Can you repeat that? You cut out. That's really important. I want to get that.
I mean, magical community is also not just about meals and rituals, but it's also about creating space where people can let down their guard and actually share who they are, and feel that it's safe to do so.
Absolutely. I love that. We're going to take a super quick break so that we can hear from our amazing sponsors. And we will be right back. You're awesome. Like, seriously, like, I could literally talk to you all day. And it's funny because both Christopher and Matt said to me, "You're going to love Ivo. He could talk about anything." And I was like, I could talk about anything. I I'm so
I
jazzed.
love talking.
I'm so jazzed. Also, can I just, on a personal note, your beard is fantastic.
Ha!
Okay. I love beards. Love beards. your beard is fantastic. My husband has this as well, but he did this with the little twirl up on the mustache. But it's fantastic beard, my friend. Okay. All right, you ready? Do you need anything? Do you need to get a drink, walk away? You're good?
I had a sip. I had a sip. That's all I
Okay.
needed.
Okay.
Allergies are acting up because we're further south
Yeah.
in Delaware, so that everything is, the trees are all making their magic.
Yeah. Matt was having a problem with that last night, and I'm by
Oh, yeah, he's in
Christopher.
California now, so
Yeah. And I'm by Christopher. I'm like 15 minutes from Christopher.
Right.
And it's fucking cold. I'm from New York originally.
It's going to be 74 here today. Now it's going to be.
I mean, that's okay. I mean, Delaware is nice though. Delaware is nice. Delaware, Maryland, you still get all the seasons, but they're a little bit more mild. You know, I have a ton of friends in Maryland. You know, it's very nice there. And like, that's like, if I was ever going to go south, that's as far south as I would go. We're from New York, so coming north was, we grew up on Long Island. Don't hold it against me. I'm super nice. I was too nice to be from there, so I moved to New England. I say that all the time. You know, I like it in New England because the pace is the same, but nobody's trying to run you over with their car. So, all right. Are you ready, sir?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, here we go. We are back with the amazing Ivo Dominguez Jr. This has like been one of my favorite conversations ever. I'm like elated. I feel like I honestly, I want to hug you so bad. I just fucking COVID. I want to come where you are and hug you.
I miss hugs.
I miss hugs. And I have a wonderful, very bear-like man in my home, and I hug him so hard all the time. So, but I miss hugging strangers. Like, you're a stranger. Well, you were an hour ago. Now you're a friend. Okay. So let's talk about your amazing forthcoming book, which actually I'm really excited about. It's called The 4 Elements of the Wise, Working with the Magical Powers of Earth, Air, Water, and Fire. And this is going to be available at the end of May. So I'm not sure when this episode is going to air. It might be the beginning of May. It might be June, but right around the airing of this book is going to be available. So tell us all about it.
So all my books are actually one book. No, seriously, all my books are an attempt to write down what I know and how I work and how I view the world. So in my head, there's a connecting thread so that they're like uber chapters of one large book.
Okay.
They're all standalones, but they've also been foisted upon me by friends.
So your friends are like, you need to write this book.
No, so here's the deal. I love to talk. I hate writing.
I get that.
I do.
I get that.
I do. I can make myself write, and I do it.
Yeah.
But so that I actually did a whole series of in-person workshops about the 4 elements over the course of 2-3 years, and actually I did one up near you over at Temple of Witchcraft, a weekend workshop that I did for them on the elements, and everybody at the end of the workshops were like, you should really write a book about this. You should really write a book about this. So, by the way, same thing with the Keys to Perception or the astrology book, or they were all, I want you to write about the things that you teach in your classes.
Yep. That's what happened with my book. I was like teaching about aphrodisiac foods, and people were like, there's so much information here. You need to put this in a book because I need to take it home with me. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, sure. The demand is there,
The demand is there. And even though most people think, well, that should be a really organic process. You've already taught a class about it. No. Because now you have to, no, not at all. Because you then have to anticipate all the things that are not in the mind of the person in front of you, and all the things that they can't just raise their hand and ask a question about, et cetera, et cetera. But the 4 elements was like, I was teaching a lot of classes about it. And also I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about the 4 elements, because I get cranky when things that are viewed as commonplace or fundamental or basic or beginner's work are dissed.
Because that's foundational. That's foundational. And
It's
without,
foundational.
yeah, without that, you can't explore, as we were talking before, you can't explore higher magic. You can't explore, you know, becoming better at something unless you have that good foundation. Yeah, I agree 100%.
And I was also having a reaction because people were confusing symbols and objects for the reality of things. In other
Can you,
words,
yeah,
yeah,
elaborate
yeah.
on that?
So when I think about fire or water or earth or air, some people immediately go to salt, or here's a rock,
Mhm.
or here's my athame, or here's my chalice. And it's like, yes, yes, yes. But those are small representations of something which is vast and universal and huge and full of mystery. And to borrow a line from you know, my days of being a little Catholic boy, idolatry bad, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah,
so, so, that,
100%.
so people minimize what's a vast mystery because, oh, I have a chalice, I have this crystal.
Right.
So they confuse that the small thing that they grasp or hold actually is all there is. So there's also this diminished expectations about what kind of magic or what kind of personal transformation comes from delving deeper. So the book can be read if you're a brand new person, can be read if you've been at the intermediate level, can be read if you've been at this a long time, because it's about reintroducing and reinforcing the mystery of the four elements and spirit, as opposed to just doing the check boxes of these are all the correspondences,
Mm.
and here's a handful of quick and practical tips. I do include some practical tips, but it is in the context of this is a deep mystery.
What did you find the most challenging about this work?
About the elemental work,
Yeah.
honestly, the part of it where we start talking about the elements as beings or as consciousnesses, when people start talking about what's intelligence or what's identity or what's spirituality. I mean, people talk about things like gnomes or sylphs or fire elementals or water elementals, and more often than not, those get kind of cartoonified. It's just viewed in a kind of cutesy, small way, as opposed to, you know, just because something is, let's just has a narrower singing range than you, they only sing one element,
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they can't produce amazing, elaborate music.
Well, yeah, and I
And
mean, like you're saying, things
yeah,
being minimized, right? Those elements being minimized, and then the idea of minimizing those elemental beings. The truth is that just because something is small doesn't mean it's not incredibly powerful. You know, when we think about things, what comes to mind when you're talking about that is wind. You know, we don't really think about air. We don't really think about it unless
mhm,
it's a hurricane, and then it knocks down buildings and rips roofs off, and you know, so it can be so powerful, but on a daily basis we don't acknowledge the enormity of that element until it's, you know, until it's
right,
doing something where
right,
you really need to understand and respect those elements and the spiritual or the beings that represent those elements for what they are. Yes, fairies
mhm,
might be, to you, you might see them and visualize them as tiny and cute, but that doesn't mean that they're not incredibly powerful. So I think that's a really good point. That's a really good point.
yeah. And because it's a modern book, I also remind people that these things are older than humanity, older than the. I mean, if you want to think, we forget that when we talk about fire, we're talking about every star in the universe.
Whoa. 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 Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we know, but we don't, it's not a
Hold on
conscious
to,
thought.
right?
Wow. Wow.
So
That
we
just
forget
blew
that
my mind.
vast, just vast stuff.
Wow.
Also, culture, your current culture, though it's useful to apply because that's the parameters you have, isn't necessarily real. So, for example, when I'm
Mm,
talking about in lots of oldie moldy books, you'll hear words about the elemental monarch, elemental kings,
okay.
and their name and whatnot. And Paracelsus talks about them. And I said, well, I'm not going to call them kings, which carries the same idea but doesn't have a gender attached to it,
Sure. Sure. Right.
because
Again. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
why are we attaching gender to the elements in the way that we are? Or if you are attaching it, it may be useful in that particular moment, but it's not inherently true.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to, water's not, you're going to tell them, some people say, yes, fire is one of the masculine elements. Like, really?
Well, I
Mhm.
guess that I guess that is up to interpretation in many
It
ways, right?
is.
I mean,
It
for
is.
for me, I would think in working with fire, I tend to lean into the masculine side of it because of the sun and the sun god versus, sun versus moon
Right. Right.
being the lunar being feminine, solar
Hmm.
being masculine. So
Yeah.
in terms of my work, I will definitely gender it, but not in the
Hmm.
traditional way of male female. It's more like these traits are what my human brain can
Right.
understand as masculine versus feminine energy wise, right? uh, uh
Right.
Strength and power of needing, for lack of a better term, like if I need courage, or I need like the balls to do something that scares the crap
Hmm.
out of me,
Hmm.
I go and I tap into sun energy, fire energy. In terms of kitchen magic, I'm using foods that align with that,
Right.
because that's that what I would call masculine energy, and kind of tapping into that within myself. And then
Hmm.
if I need to like find compassion, or
Hmm.
or something like that, empathy, uh a softness, allowing vulnerability in a situation, I'm then going to lean towards these other energies, water energy for compassion, for example, which I consider to have more of
Sure.
a feminine
Sure.
feeling. So I think that is up to interpretation. Would you agree?
It is, and what I think what people will take away when they are reading my chapters or paragraphs around this stuff is that identify that there are many systems to apply a scale to these things. So,
Mm.
for example, in traditions, they're all valid.
Could you please repeat that? You cut out. Cut out.
Sure. Sorry.
It's
In
okay.
different traditions, the elements are applied differently to which tool corresponds to which element.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are different keys. There's also major and minor, and in different cultures, different colors have different emotional or traditional meanings.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that they're less, as long as people remember that it is an overlay that we put to something vast so that we can work with it.
Right, through our
Uh,
own lens.
we
Everybody
need to
sees everything through their own lens.
categories. Everybody needs the equivalent of concepts or words to break up the vastness of infinity into chunks that we can manage as human beings.
Right.
And also, every person who does any kind of magical work, at least in the West, has encountered the idea of naming something is a way of interacting with it in a powerful fashion.
Yes.
All right. All of this is naming. All of this is just naming the world and then having a way of interacting with those forces. So I'm not saying that any of them are work, but to be aware of the fact that different people are going to use different symbolism or apply different words or apply different color schemes, if you will, and they all work.
Mhm.
In the same way that to compare it to cooking, you can look at almost any cuisine and you can like begin to pick out these are 4 or 5 flavor profiles that come to mind when I'm looking at that cuisine, and these are herbs that are used in a particular, or spices used in a particular way. So it's kind of like the thumbprint of
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
So there's lots of different flavor profiles or thumbprints to this is the way this kind of magic works. So I'm not so, but as long as we remember, like I'm not one of those people who wants to abolish gender or any of those things. 'Cause I do have friends that's like, we used to be so much better off if the world didn't have the following things, and I go, no, the world would be so much better off if we had all those things and recognize them all as equally
Yes.
valid for the people that they are appropriate for.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Absolutely. I
but
agree.
but people forget with the elements, or when I'm talking about the elements, I make a point of creating distinctions so that I can keep things in order in my mind, and that I can then call upon them magically or energetically in specific ways. But you could use a totally different way of calling them, and it still works.
Yeah.
The part is that it's an orderly system that you apply to something that is vast so that you can work with it.
I am so excited about this book. To be honest, it seems like you've really spun a perspective that maybe most people are unaware of. For me, a lot of magic work is turning, and I say it all the time, turning the light switch on, being able to
Yeah.
illuminate an understanding of something maybe you didn't understand before. And then once that is on, you can't turn it off. Well, you can't unsee it, right? So it's very exciting
Right.
to me to see your perspective on the elements, and turn that light switch on and view them in this way. As someone who works with elements through food and works with earth magic
Mhm.
through food, I think this is going to be is really exciting project, Evo. I'm so happy. To get this. I'm gonna like go pre-order it right now. And I'm not just like kissing your butt. Like I mean it. If I wasn't interested, I'd
Right.
be like, yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
that sounds fantastic. I
Hmm.
am super excited about. Okay. So I have one last question that I ask everybody.
Okay.
So this is the kitchen witchy question, and thank you so much for talking to me about kitchen witchery today. Most people, I don't really get to really dive into kitchen magic because most people don't really acknowledge the work that they do with it. So here's my question for you: as a kitchen witch,
Mhm.
if there was one meal that you could have me make for you, magically make for you, what
Mm.
would that be and why?
So, so require time travel. In addition, we have a huge feast for somebody after they receive an initiation,
Mhm.
and we always make sure that person has things. So that I would like a meal that is post a big transform ritual, and the meal is food that helps me settle in
So
to
something that
actually
comforting,
comforting,
grounding.
energizing. I will say that I do have a love of all things pasta, so that's not a bad thing. And I also am one of those people that what spicy is good too. I'm not afraid of hot
Well, you're
either.
Cuban, right? So,
Uh,
I mean,
so you know what? Cuban food doesn't always have the hot stuff going
that's
on, though
true.
it's got a
That's
lot.
true.
It has a lot of savory flavors and combinations. So I'm a little bit of an outlier there, but I'm one of those people that when I go to the Thai restaurants, I say, no, 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 no. Your scale goes up to 5. I'd like it at 10.
That's very interesting. Okay, so this is my plan. This is my part of my
Yeah,
plan of this is
yeah,
to
yeah.
at the end of each of these interviews is that I will be like getting inspired by my guest to create a
Mhm.
recipe that's inspired by them. And so when this airs and the notes of the show go up, the recipe that you've inspired me to write will be there.
Mhm.
And I'm feeling like, because you're vegetarian, not vegan, right? So,
I'm a vegetarian, not vegan.
okay,
I end
so
up mostly vegan, but I don't mind. Mind you, I raise my own chickens, so I don't feel guilty about.
I'm feeling like you need some sort of a beautiful pasta dish, like in a cream sauce with like, I don't know, some sort of
I like capers.
yeah, capers, really.
I love
Really? So
capers.
you do like a lemon artichoke pasta with
I love.
capers
I would love artichoke.
in a cream sauce? Mhm.
Sounds really good to me.
All right. It's not very grounding. It's super energizing because of the lemon. But I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
brainstorm something wonderful and post the recipe for you.
The dairy brings me down. I mean, that's because I don't eat that much dairy, so that would definitely,
Ground you. Well, potatoes, sweet
yeah.
potatoes, things like that are really super grounding. Anything
Ooh,
that's a
ooh.
root vegetable kind of
Or you could
brings
go
you back
gnocchi.
down. Oh, gnocchi. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Gnocchi. Okay. So this has been absolutely amazing. I am like completely you're just unreal. I'm so happy that Christopher connected us and that you decided to come and have a conversation with me. We started out as strangers and now I feel like you're a friend and I can't wait to like see you in person somewhere and just hug you and just tell
It
you how
will
great you
happen.
are. Tell everyone, Ivo, where they can find you online. How can they connect with you?
Sure. Easiest way to find me is evodominguezjr.com. I mean, it's my name, it's the website, and you can track me down Facebook that way and Instagram that way.
Excellent.
And I'm looking forward to a first shot, waiting for my second, and look forward to a
Yes.
time that we can all go to events
Oh,
and
be
meet
amazing.
each other in person. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All those notes, all your website and everything that's going to be listed on our notes for the episode. So
Sweet.
everybody will be able to find you. If you didn't catch that, it's evodominguezjr.com. He's on Instagram, he's on Facebook, and he's just the most wonderful, nicest, loving, like heart throbbing person. Like I just could feel your heart through the computer. So I am just ridiculously grateful. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks everybody for listening. And until next time, I leave you with so many blessings and so much gratitude. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks.